The diesel heater arrived on my doorstep 3 days before the first major snowfall of the season, and I had no idea it would turn my life in Briarwood Heights, Minnesota, into a complete nightmare. I'm Keith Zimmerman, and I bought my modest 2-story house in this suburban development just outside Minneapolis about 18 months ago. The place seemed perfect at the time, a quiet neighborhood with well-maintained lawns and reasonable HOA fees. What I didn't realize was that the homeowners association was run by a woman who made Stalin look laid back. Her name was Brenda Hutchinson, a 47-year-old real estate agent with highlighted blonde hair that she wore in that signature. "I want to speak to your manager," Bob cut. She lived 3 houses down from me, in a sprawling McMansion that violated at least half the architectural guidelines she loved to enforce on everyone else. The diesel heater was a European model, one of those compact Chinese diesel air heaters that had become popular with the van life crowd and off-grid enthusiasts. I'd ordered it specifically for my detached garage, which I'd been converting into a workshop. The garage wasn't connected to the house's heating system, and Minnesota winters were brutal. I needed something efficient that could keep the space warm while I worked on my woodworking projects. Installation took me most of a Saturday afternoon. The unit was surprisingly compact, about the size of a shoebox, and the exhaust pipe was barely visible once I mounted it to the exterior wall. I made sure everything was up to code, even called in a certified HVAC guy to inspect the installation. He gave it his stamp of approval, noting that diesel heaters were actually safer than many propane alternatives and far more efficient. The heater worked beautifully. That first evening, I cranked it up, and the garage transformed from an icebox into a comfortable workspace within 20 minutes. The purring sound of the diesel pump was oddly soothing, and the warm air it generated was clean and dry. I spent the next few days organizing my tools and planning out my winter projects. Then came the knock on my door. It was a Tuesday morning, around 10 o'clock. I'd taken the day off work to finish setting up my workspace. When I opened the door, Brenda stood there with her arms crossed, wearing a cream-colored puffer jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Behind her stood 2 other HOA board members, Gary Pemberton and Susan Walsh, both looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Zimmerman," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "we need to discuss your recent installation." "My installation?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The diesel heater," she said, pronouncing the words like they were profanity. "In your garage. I received multiple complaints from neighbors about the smell and the noise." I blinked. "What smell? What noise? The thing is barely audible and the exhaust is clean burning diesel." "Nevertheless," Brenda continued, pulling out a folder from under her arm, "I've reviewed the HOA covenants and external heating appliances require board approval. You failed to submit the proper paperwork." "It's a garage heater," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It's not visible from the street. The exhaust pipe is painted to match the siding. I even had it professionally installed and inspected." Gary shifted uncomfortably. "Keith, look, I actually think it's pretty cool, but Brenda's right that technically any external modifications need approval." "My detached garage is external," I asked. "The heater exhausts to the exterior," Brenda said triumphantly. "That makes it an external modification. You need to submit Form 17B for approval, and given the nature of this installation, I'm afraid the board will need to evaluate it thoroughly." Susan finally spoke up. "The thing is, Keith, diesel fuel storage is also a concern. We have regulations about combustible materials on the property." "I have a 5-gallon jerry can in my garage," I said. People in this neighborhood have more gasoline than that in their lawn mowers and snowblowers combined. Those are different, Brenda said, her smile sharp as a knife. Until this matter is resolved, I'm going to have to ask you to cease operation of the heater immediately. You're joking. I'm completely serious. As of now, that heater is in violation of HOA regulations. If you continue to operate it, we'll have no choice but to begin fining you, $50 per day, accumulating until compliance. I felt my jaw tighten. Fine. Where's this Form 17B? I'll email it to you, Brenda said sweetly. The board meeting to review your application won't be until next month. We're quite backed up. Next month. It's November. We're about to hit peak winter. Should have thought of that before installing without permission, Brenda said, turning on her heel. Gary, Susan, let's go. Gary gave me an apologetic shrug before following. Susan wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood in my doorway watching them walk away, anger building in my chest. The temperature was already dropping. Weather forecasts were predicting one of the coldest winters Minnesota had seen in a decade, with temperatures potentially hitting -20 or worse. That evening, I filled out Form 17B. It was 6 pages of ridiculous bureaucratic nonsense, asking for detailed specifications, environmental impact assessments, and neighbor testimony. I attached photos, the HVAC inspector's report, and manufacturer specifications showing that the heater met all EPA standards for emissions. I submitted everything by email that night. Brenda responded within an hour. Received. Your application will be reviewed at our December meeting on the 15th. That was 4 weeks away. The next morning, I woke up to find a formal violation notice taped to my front door. It cited me for operating an unapproved heating device and demanded immediate cessation. The notice also informed me that I was now subject to daily fines starting from the previous day. I called my lawyer, Tom Rodriguez, whom I'd used for my house closing. He listened to my situation and sighed heavily. Keith, HOA disputes are messy. They're technically a private contract you signed when you bought the house. Unless they're violating state or federal law, they have pretty broad authority. But this is insane, I said. It's a garage heater. I know. Look, I can send them a letter stating your case, but honestly, these things usually end up in arbitration or court, and that gets expensive fast. Sometimes it's cheaper to just play their game. So I'm supposed to freeze in my own garage for a month while they drag their feet. Document everything, Tom advised. Every interaction, every email, every temperature reading. If this goes south, you want a paper trail. I took his advice. I set up a small weather station in my garage, recording the temperature every hour. I stopped using the diesel heater, even though it killed me to do so. My workshop became unusable as temperatures inside the garage dropped to match the outside air, hovering right around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. November crawled by. I tried to work in the garage a few times, bundled up in multiple layers, but my hands would go numb after 20 minutes. I couldn't hold my tools properly. My woodworking projects ground to a complete halt. Meanwhile, I started noticing Brenda everywhere. She'd drive past my house slowly, clearly checking to see if I was violating her precious rules. Twice, I saw her actually get out of her car and walk around my property, peering into my garage windows. The third time it happened, I confronted her. "Can I help you with something, Brenda?" She jumped, not realizing I was watching from my kitchen window. "Just doing a routine property inspection." "You mean trespassing?" "HOA board members have the right to inspect properties for code violations," she said primly. "You have that right in writing." "Because I'm pretty sure you need permission to be on my property." Her face reddened. Are you threatening me? I'm asking you to respect my privacy." She pulled out her phone and took a picture of my garage. "I'm documenting a potential violation." "Of what?" "I'm not using the heater." "We'll see about that," she said, marching back to her car. That evening, I received an email from Brenda stating that she'd detected diesel fumes near my property and suspected I was operating the heater in violation of the cease order. I responded with time-stamped photos from my garage security camera showing that I hadn't entered the garage all day. She didn't respond. December arrived with a vengeance. A polar vortex swept down from Canada, and temperatures plummeted. The first week of December saw highs barely reaching 0 degrees Fahrenheit, with nighttime lows hitting -15. My house heating bill skyrocketed because I was essentially heating a poorly insulated attached garage through the shared wall. I'd closed the door between the house and garage, but the cold still seeped through. On December 10th, 5 days before the scheduled HOA meeting, my furnace broke down. I woke up at 3 in the morning to a house that was 45 degrees inside and dropping fast. The furnace was completely dead, making clicking noises but not igniting. I called emergency HVAC service, and they told me they were completely swamped with calls due to the cold snap. Earliest they could get someone out was late afternoon. I sat there in my freezing house, wrapped in every blanket I owned, and stared at my garage where a perfectly functional diesel heater sat unused. At 6 in the morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to freeze to death in my own home because of some power-hungry HOA president and her arbitrary rules. I went out to the garage, fired up the diesel heater, and brought it inside my house. The warmth was immediate and glorious. Within an hour, my living room was back up to a comfortable 65 degrees. I kept the heater running all day, moving it to different rooms as needed. The HVAC technician arrived at 4 p.m. and diagnosed a cracked heat exchanger. The part would take 3 days to arrive, and installation would be another full day after that. Minimum. He apologized profusely, but there was nothing he could do to speed up the process. "Lots of people in the same boat," he said. "This cold snap has been brutal on older furnaces." After he left, I made a calculation. 4 days minimum without heat in weather that was predicted to get even colder. I couldn't stay in a hotel because I had my dog, Rufus, a 12-year-old golden retriever who was too old for this kind of stress. I couldn't impose on friends or family with a large dog for that long. I kept the diesel heater running in my house. The next morning, December 11th, Brenda showed up with the police. I opened my door to find 2 Minneapolis police officers standing next to a very smug-looking Brenda. "Officers," I said cautiously. The older cop, whose nameplate read Martinez, looked tired and cold. "Sir, we received a complaint about a heating device being operated in violation of local codes." "My furnace is broken," I said. "The diesel heater is EPA approved and safe for indoor use." "I have all the documentation." "Can we see the device?" Martinez asked. I let them in. The diesel heater was humming quietly in my living room, its exhaust hose running out through a slightly opened window. I showed them the manufacturer specifications, the EPA approval, and the HVAC technician's report about my broken furnace. Martinez studied everything carefully while the younger cop, Officer Chen, looked around. Rufus wandered over and sniffed their legs, tail wagging. "This all looks legitimate," Martinez said finally. "Sir, this is a civil HOA matter. We can't enforce their rules unless an actual law is being broken." "But he's violating our community standards," Brenda protested. "Madam," Martinez said patiently, "those aren't criminal statutes. You'll need to resolve this through your HOA procedures or civil court." So you're just going to let him continue breaking our rules? We're not going to force a man to freeze in his own home when he's using a legal, safe heating device, Chen said firmly. Especially not in this weather. Brenda's face turned an impressive shade of red. This is unacceptable. I know the police chief personally. I'm going to file a complaint. That's your right, madam, Martinez said. But our answer will be the same. Stay warm, sir. Hope your furnace gets fixed soon. After they left, Brenda stood on my porch, shaking with rage. You haven't heard the last of this. The board meeting is in 4 days. When we formally deny your application, you'll be in violation with no recourse. Those daily fines will bury you. Looking forward to it, I said, closing the door. Over the next 3 days, the temperature dropped further. On December 13th, the official temperature in Minneapolis hit -18 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills bringing it down to -40. It was the kind of cold that made your nose hairs freeze instantly, where exposed skin could get frostbite in under 5 minutes, and my furnace was still broken. The part had arrived, but the HVAC company was so overwhelmed with emergency calls that my installation kept getting pushed back. They promised to have someone out by December 14th, the day before the HOA meeting. Meanwhile, the diesel heater kept my house warm and comfortable. I monitored it constantly, making sure the exhaust was properly ventilated and the fuel levels were adequate. The device performed flawlessly. On the morning of December 14th, something unexpected happened. I was making coffee when I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find Gary Pemberton standing there, looking nervous. "Keith, can I talk to you? Off the record." I let him in. He glanced around, saw the diesel heater and nodded appreciatively. "Smart move, keeping that running. My furnace went out yesterday. I'm using space heaters, but they're eating through electricity and barely keeping up." "What's up, Gary?" He pulled out his phone and showed me an email chain. "This is the board discussion about your heater application. I probably shouldn't be showing you this, but I think you should know what you're walking into tomorrow." I read through the emails. Brenda had been lobbying hard for a complete denial, calling the diesel heater a safety hazard and a nuisance to the community. Susan had sided with her, but Gary had written several emails arguing that the heater met all legal requirements and that denying it was unreasonable. The deciding vote would come from the 4th board member, Patricia Chen, whom I'd never met. She'd been largely silent in the email chain. "Patricia's husband works for the city," Gary said quietly. "Brenda's been putting pressure on her. I wanted to give you a heads up that this probably won't go your way." "So what happens then?" I asked. "They'll formally deny your application. You'll have 30 days to remove the heater or face escalating fines. You can appeal to the full membership, but that takes time. Or you can take it to court, which takes even more time and money." This is insane. I know. I voted against Brenda becoming president, but she won by a landslide. She promised to maintain property values and preserve community standards. What that really means is she likes controlling people. After Gary left, I spent the rest of the day documenting everything. I took photos, compiled emails, created a timeline of events. Tom Rodriguez had advised me to build a paper trail, and I was going to have the most comprehensive paper trail in HOA history. The HVAC technician finally arrived at 6 p.m. He worked until 9 o'clock at night, replacing the cracked heat exchanger. When he finished, my furnace roared back to life, pumping beautiful warm air through my vents. "You're all set," he said, packing up his tools. "This should last you another 10 years easy. Sorry about the delay." "Not your fault," I said, paying him. "Crazy weather." After he left, I looked at the diesel heater, still humming away in my living room. I could turn it off now, return it to the garage. Part of me wanted to, just to avoid the confrontation at tomorrow's meeting. But another part of me, the part that was absolutely furious at being treated like a criminal for trying to stay warm in my own house, wanted to keep it running out of pure spite. I compromised. I turned it off, but I didn't move it. Let Brenda wonder. The HOA meeting was held at 7 p.m. on December 15th in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. When I arrived, about 20 homeowners were already there, seated in folding chairs facing a table where the board members sat. Brenda sat in the center, wearing a navy blue blazer that screamed, "I'm in charge here." Susan and Gary flanked her with Patricia on the end. I took a seat in the back and several neighbors nodded at me. I recognized most of them by sight, though I didn't know many personally. Brenda called the meeting to order, and they worked through various mundane business items. Approval of last meeting's minutes. Discussion of snow removal contractor bids. A complaint about someone's Christmas lights being too bright. Finally, 45 minutes in, Brenda cleared her throat. Now we come to application 17B, submitted by Keith Zimmerman for approval of a diesel heating device installation. Mr. Zimmerman, would you like to present your case? I stood up and walked to the front. I prepared a brief statement outlining the heater's safety features, its legal compliance, and its practical necessity. I kept it under 3 minutes. When I finished, Brenda smiled that knife-edge smile. "Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Does anyone have questions?" Susan raised her hand. "I'm concerned about the environmental impact. Diesel fuel produces emissions that could affect our neighbors." "The EPA certification addresses that," I said. "The emissions are well within federal standards. It's cleaner than most car exhausts." "But it's still diesel," Susan pressed. "There's a smell. When properly functioning, there's minimal odor," I countered, "and it's in my detached garage at least 20 feet from any neighboring property." Patricia spoke for the first time. "What about noise? I've heard complaints about noise." "From who?" I asked. "My immediate neighbors haven't complained to me. The heater produces about 40 decibels of sound, which is quieter than normal conversation." Brenda cut in. "We've received multiple anonymous complaints about both smell and noise." "Anonymous complaints," I repeated. "So I can't address them directly or verify if they're legitimate." "Our residents have a right to privacy when reporting violations," Brenda said primly. Gary leaned forward. "I've actually been by Keith's property several times since the installation. I haven't noticed any smell or excessive noise. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here." "You're not qualified to make that assessment," Brenda snapped. "Neither are you," Gary shot back. The room got tense. A few homeowners murmured among themselves. Brenda regained her composure. "Regardless, the issue is that Mr. Zimmerman installed this device without prior approval. That alone is grounds for denial." "I wasn't aware I needed approval for a garage heater," I said. "Ignorance of the rules isn't an excuse." "Then maybe the rules need to be clearer," someone called out from the audience. I turned to see my next-door neighbor, an older woman named Margaret Foster. "I've lived here 15 years, and I didn't know garage heaters needed approval either." A few other neighbors voiced agreement. Brenda banged a gavel that I didn't even know she had. "Order, please. This isn't a town hall. The board will now vote on the application." "Don't we get to discuss it more?" Gary asked. "We've discussed it plenty." "All in favor of approving the application," Gary raised his hand. Only Gary. "All opposed?" Brenda, Susan, and Patricia raised their hands. "The application is denied 3-1. Mr. Zimmerman, you have 30 days to remove the heating device. This meeting is adjourned." The gavel banged again. I stood there, stunned by how quickly it had happened. Just like that, months of work, hundreds of dollars in equipment and installation, all thrown out because Brenda Hutchinson wanted to flex her authority. As people started filing out, Gary approached me. "I'm sorry, Keith, I tried." "I know, thanks." Margaret Foster stopped by as well. "That was a load of garbage, dear. Brenda's been getting worse every year. Someone needs to stand up to her." After everyone left, I sat alone in the empty clubhouse for a few minutes trying to process what had just happened. Then my phone rang. It was Tom Rodriguez. "Hey, Tom." "Keith, I just got a very interesting call from the Minnesota Attorney General's office, Consumer Protection Division. They've been investigating HOA violations across the state, and your case came across their radar somehow. How? Not sure. But they want to know if you're interested in filing a formal complaint. They think there might be a pattern of abuse with your HOA." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Yeah, I'm interested." The next few days were a blur. I met with an assistant attorney general named Rachel Kowalski, a sharp woman in her 30s who specialized in housing law. I provided her with all my documentation, and she was particularly interested in the timeline of events. "So they denied your application in the middle of a historic cold snap?" she asked, making notes. "Yep, and my furnace had just been repaired. If it hadn't been, I don't know what I would have done." "That's what's interesting here," Rachel said. "There's a question of whether their denial creates an unsafe living condition. Minnesota has habitability statutes that supersede HOA authority. Meaning that if their rules prevent you from maintaining a safe, heated home, those rules might be legally invalid. We'd need to prove it, but you've got a good case here." She took my complaint and said she'd be in touch. In the meantime, the 30-day clock was ticking. I had until January 14th to remove the heater or face daily fines of $50, but the universe wasn't done throwing curveballs. On December 20th, the temperature dropped again. And this time, it wasn't just cold. It was catastrophically cold. The National Weather Service issued a rare extreme cold warning. Temperatures were forecast to drop to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills reaching negative 60. This was life-threatening weather. The kind where your car won't start, pipes freeze and burst, and people die of exposure if they're caught outside. And that's when the rolling blackout started. The power grid, overwhelmed by heating demand, began failing. Our neighborhood lost power at 6 a.m. on December 21st. The utility company said it could be hours before restoration, potentially longer. Without power, my newly repaired furnace was useless. The blower motor needed electricity. Within 30 minutes of the power going out, I could feel the temperature dropping inside my house. I went to my garage and looked at the diesel heater. It didn't need electricity to run, just a 12-volt battery to power the fuel pump and fan. I had a marine battery I used for camping. Perfect. I hauled the diesel heater back inside, connected it to the battery, and fired it up. The familiar purring sound filled my living room. Warm air began flowing. Rufus curled up next to the heater with a contented sigh. I posted about the power outage in our neighborhood Facebook group, mentioning that I had a backup heating solution. Within minutes, my phone started ringing. First it was Margaret Foster. "Keith, dear, I hate to impose, but my house is getting very cold very fast. I'm 78 years old and I'm worried. Can I come stay with you until the power comes back?" "Of course, Margaret, come right over." Then it was the Johnsons, a young couple 2 streets over with a 6-month-old baby. "We're freezing. The baby won't stop crying. Please, we just need somewhere warm. Come on over." Then more calls. More neighbors. Families with small children, elderly residents, people with medical conditions. Word spread fast that I had heat and my house became a makeshift warming center. By noon, I had 15 people packed into my living room and kitchen, all huddled around the little diesel heater that Brenda Hutchinson had tried so hard to ban. I'd started it up twice more from the garage, running them in shifts to keep different areas of the house warm. Someone brought a portable propane stove, and we heated up soup. Another neighbor contributed bread and sandwich materials. It turned into an impromptu community gathering, people sharing food and stories while the wind howled outside and the temperature continued to plummet. At 2 p.m., there was a loud knock on my door. I opened it to find Brenda Hutchinson standing there, and for the first time since I'd met her, she didn't look smug or in control. She looked scared. "Keith," she said, her voice shaking from cold or emotion or both. "My power is out. My house is freezing. I need help." I stared at her for a long moment. This woman had made my life miserable for weeks. She'd banned my heater, tried to fine me, sixed the police on me, and denied my reasonable application out of pure spite. And now she was on my doorstep, asking for help. Every fiber of my being wanted to slam the door in her face, but I didn't, because that would make me just like her. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She entered, and I saw several neighbors exchange glances. Everyone knew who she was and what she'd done. Margaret Foster, bless her heart, spoke up immediately. "Brenda, good of you to join us. We're staying warm thanks to Keith's diesel heater. You know, the one you tried to ban." Brenda's face flushed red, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, shivering, looking utterly defeated. Over the next hour, more people arrived. Gary Pemberton and his family, Susan Walsh and her teenage kids. Even Patricia Chen showed up with her husband and elderly mother. By 4 p.m., my house had 30 people in it, including 3 of the 4 HOA board members who had voted to deny my heating application. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The power stayed out all day. Night fell, and the temperature outside hit negative 32 degrees. Inside my house, clustered around 3 diesel heaters running in rotation, we maintained a comfortable 68 degrees. People shared blankets, told stories, played cards. The kids thought it was a great adventure. The adults were just grateful to be warm. Around 8 p.m., Brenda finally approached me. I was in the kitchen making another pot of coffee on the propane stove. "Keith," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you." I turned to face her. She looked exhausted, her perfect hair disheveled, her makeup smudged. "I was wrong," she said, the words coming out like they physically hurt. "About the heater, about all of it. You were right and I was wrong." "Okay," I said carefully. "I got caught up in the rules, in maintaining control and being right, and I lost sight of what actually matters: common sense. Helping neighbors, being a community instead of just enforcing regulations. That's quite an admission. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I want to make it right. Tomorrow, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. We're going to overturn the denial and approve your application retroactively, so there won't be any fines." "What changed your mind?" I asked, though I knew the answer. She gestured around the crowded house. "This. All of these people, warm and safe because you did the reasonable thing even when I tried to stop you. I could have killed someone with my stubbornness, if you hadn't had this heater, if people hadn't had somewhere to go." She trailed off, and I saw actual tears in her eyes. "People make mistakes," I said. "What matters is what you do next." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Keith, for letting me in. You had every right to turn me away. That's not who I am." The power came back on at 10 p.m. People cheered, and gradually everyone started heading home, thanking me profusely as they left. I told them it was no problem, that I was just glad I could help. Brenda was one of the last to leave. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'll send out the notice first thing in the morning." "I'll be there," I said, After everyone left, I collapsed on my couch, exhausted. Rufus jumped up next to me and I scratched his ears. "Well, buddy," I said, "that was quite a day." The emergency board meeting happened as promised. Brenda opened by publicly apologizing to me in front of the assembled homeowners. Then the board unanimously voted to approve my diesel heater application. They also voted to revise the HOA rules to allow similar heating devices without prior approval, as long as they met basic safety standards. Susan Walsh actually apologized to me personally after the meeting. I should have stood up to Brenda earlier. I was just trying to keep the peace, but that was cowardly of me. "We all make choices," I said. "What matters is learning from them." But the story didn't end there. In early January, I got another call from Rachel Kowalski at the Attorney General's office. "Keith, I wanted to update you. We've been investigating your HOA, and we found some interesting things." "Like what?" "Like the fact that Brenda Hutchinson has been collecting fines from homeowners for years without proper documentation or accounting. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars that should have gone into the HOA's general fund, but seem to have disappeared." My jaw dropped. "Are you saying she was embezzling?" "That's what it looks like." "We're going to need to do a full audit, but preliminary evidence suggests she's been using HOA fines as her personal piggy bank." "Did you know she's taken 3 luxury vacations in the past year?" I did not. "All paid for with cash. And she's made several large purchases that don't match her real estate agent income. We think the HOA fines filled in the gaps." "Holy shit. We'll need you to testify if this goes to court. Are you willing?" "Absolutely." Over the next few weeks, the investigation expanded. The Attorney General's office brought in forensic accountants who pored over the HOA's financial records. What they found was damning. Brenda had been systematically overcharging homeowners for violations, real or invented, and pocketing the difference. She'd collected fines for unmowed lawns, incorrectly colored mailboxes, unauthorized holiday decorations, and dozens of other petty infractions. Most homeowners had just paid rather than fight her, not realizing the money was going into her personal accounts. In total, she'd stolen over $78,000 over a 3-year period. On February 3rd, Brenda Hutchinson was arrested at her home on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The arrest made the local news, and our neighborhood became briefly famous as that HOA where the president got arrested. Gary Pemberton was appointed interim president, and one of his first acts was to issue refunds to every homeowner who had been overcharged. I got a check for $450, money I'd paid in various bogus fines over the 18 months I'd lived there. Brenda's trial happened in May. I testified about my experience with the diesel heater ban, establishing a pattern of arbitrary enforcement and retaliation. Other homeowners testified about similar experiences, painting a picture of a woman who used her HOA authority as a weapon and a cash cow. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 4 years in prison, plus restitution of the full amount stolen. Her husband divorced her before she even began serving time. As for me, my diesel heater became something of a neighborhood legend. During that brutal winter, with its multiple power outages and record cold, my garage workshop stayed warm and functional. I completed 3 custom furniture pieces that I sold for good money, and I became the go-to guy whenever someone needed a warming station during the frequent outages. In March, the HOA held new elections. I didn't run for the board, but I did attend every meeting, making sure the new leadership understood that residents wanted reasonable rules, not authoritarian control. Margaret Foster became board president, and she was everything Brenda wasn't: reasonable, kind, and focused on building community rather than enforcing compliance. Under her leadership, the HOA revised dozens of outdated rules and cut the annual fees by 20%. The following winter was milder, but I kept my diesel heater in prime condition, just in case. And when the Johnsons, the young couple with the baby, asked my advice on heating their garage, I helped them pick out and install their own diesel heater. No permission slip required. Sometimes I think about that day when my house was packed with neighbors, all of us huddled together against the brutal cold. It was the day I realized that being right isn't as important as being helpful, and that rules should serve people, not control them. Brenda Hutchinson learned that lesson the hard way, sitting in a prison cell while the neighborhood she tried to dominate moved on without her. As for the diesel heater that started it all, it's still humming away in my garage on cold winter nights, keeping my workshop warm while I build furniture and enjoy the peace and quiet. Every time I fire it up, I smile, remembering the HOA president who tried to ban it and ended up depending on it to survive. Life has a funny way of teaching lessons to those who need them most. Brenda needed to learn about humility and consequences. I learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, is always worth it. And our whole neighborhood learned that community isn't about following rules blindly. It's about people taking care of each other, especially when the temperature drops below zero and the power goes out. I still live in that same house in Briarwood Heights. My workshop is now fully operational year-round, and I've expanded my woodworking hobby into a small side business. The diesel heater runs whenever I need it, approved and legal and completely boring in its normalcy. Margaret Foster retired from the board last year, and Gary Pemberton took over as president. He's doing a fine job, keeping things running smoothly without drama or tyranny. The HOA has become what it should have been all along, a simple administrative body that maintains common areas and resolves legitimate disputes, not a fiefdom for petty dictators. Sometimes I see Brenda's old house, now occupied by a nice family with 2 kids and a golden retriever puppy that Rufus has befriended. They had no idea about the house's history when they moved in, and I didn't tell them. No point in dwelling on the past. The final chapter came in August, almost a year after that fateful winter. I received a letter forwarded from the state prison where Brenda was serving her sentence. It was from her, handwritten on prison stationery. The letter was surprisingly thoughtful. She apologized again, more deeply this time, with the kind of reflection that only comes from having your entire life dismantled by your own bad choices. She talked about therapy she was receiving, about recognizing her need to control people as a symptom of her own insecurity. She wrote that the moment she remembered most clearly from that whole disaster was standing in my living room, warm and safe thanks to the heater she'd tried to ban, surrounded by neighbors who had every reason to resent her. She said it was the moment she realized what she'd become. I wrote back. Not a long letter, just a short note saying I appreciated her apology and hoped she was using her time constructively. I didn't forgive her exactly, because some things can't be neatly resolved with forgiveness, but I acknowledged her efforts to become better. She never responded, and I didn't expect her to. But I kept the letter, filed away with all the other documentation from that crazy time. A reminder that people are complex, that everyone has reasons for their behavior even if those reasons don't excuse it. And that sometimes the worst moments reveal who people really are, for better or worse. On the anniversary of that record-breaking cold day, when my house became a warming center, I invited all the neighbors who'd sought shelter to a backyard barbecue. It was a beautiful summer evening, warm and mild, the polar opposite of that freezing winter day. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, the kids ran around in the yard, and as the sun set we sat around my fire pit telling stories. Eventually, inevitably, someone brought up that day. "Remember how cold it was?" one of the Johnsons said, bouncing their now toddler on his knee. "I was so scared for Emma. She was so tiny." "We all were scared," Margaret said, "but Keith saved us." "The diesel heater saved us," I corrected. "I just had the good sense to use it." "And the good heart to share it," Margaret added firmly. We raised our drinks in a toast, to warmth and community and helping your neighbors. The fire crackled, the stars came out, and I felt a deep sense of contentment. My diesel heater saga had started as a nightmare, a bureaucratic battle against an unreasonable authority figure. But it had ended as something else entirely, a reminder that doing the right thing, standing firm on principle while remaining compassionate to people, was always the correct path. Brenda Hutchinson had offered me nothing when she banned my heater. But when the temperatures dropped below zero and she needed help, I'd offered her warmth and safety anyway. Not because she deserved it, but because everyone deserves basic human decency, even those who fail to show it to others. That's what community means. Not following rules for rules' sake, but taking care of each other when it matters most. And if you need me, I'll be in my garage workshop, warm and comfortable no matter how cold it gets outside, building furniture and living my life. The diesel heater hums quietly in the corner, a small victory over bureaucracy, a testament to common sense, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest difference. The HOA board never bothered me again. My property stayed exactly as I wanted it, within reasonable bounds of community standards. My heater ran whenever I needed it, maintaining a comfortable workspace through 2 more Minnesota winters. I even expanded my operation, adding a second diesel heater for particularly cold days and upgrading my insulation. The workshop became a neighborhood gathering spot, a place where guys would stop by to talk projects, share tools, and enjoy the warmth on cold winter evenings. Life went on as it always does. The drama faded into memory, then into legend, then into just another story people told when explaining why our HOA was so relaxed compared to others. But I never forgot the lesson. Authority without compassion is tyranny. Rules without reason are oppression. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is simply help your neighbor stay warm when the world gets cold. My diesel heater still sits in that garage, faithfully providing heat whenever needed. It's not just a machine anymore. It's a symbol of standing up for what's right, of common sense prevailing over arbitrary power, and of a community learning to take care of its own. And that's worth more than all the HOA regulations ever written.